Good morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dreamadginate Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. super early morning wake-up call out west and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in on this Tuesday morning. Hoping that we're getting closer and closer to restarts over in Europe. Still a lot of uncertainty there, but even more so here in the States. And a lot of that has to do with our structure and our system. And coming up after the break, we're going to have Chris Kivlahan on the show. We're going to get into some of that in just a few minutes. Looking at the landscape, we talked about it yesterday that on Friday, the U.S. Women's National Team case hit a bump in the road, and there was a summary judgment that went in favor of U.S. Soccer, which was not the outcome that they were hoping for, that many of us were hoping for, looking at how the Federation operates in regards to the national team programs and their, quite frankly, their lack of leadership in this arena. But it's been indicative of their poor leadership across the board. As a result, the U.S. Women's National Team vowed to keep fighting. And we talked a little bit yesterday about how Michelle Akers, tweeted and posted on Instagram as well, talking about, where we are in this country and American soccer and the landscape, etc. We have some current U.S. national team players who have also spoken up about this legal setback. Both Alex Morgan as well as Megan Rapinoe have both come out. These are the co-captains of the U.S. Women's National Soccer Team, saying that they were shocked after their team's claims for equal pay were dismissed by a court, but said that they have planned to appeal the decision. And this decision was out of left field for us, said Alex Morgan, appearing on a remote live feed on the Good Morning America program on Monday. We are fighters, and we will continue to fight together for this. Megan Rapinoe went on to say, if I earn $1 every time I play and a man earns $3 just because I win 10 games and he only wins 3 games, and so I make $10 and he makes $9, I'm not sure how that's me making more money. That is a big element of this as well. People have said, well, look at the amount of money, look at the totals, but it's not apples and to apples here. This is an apples and oranges because you have to look at rate of pay. That's part of why I have constantly said, don't call this an equal pay fight. This is an equal treatment fight. Travel, accommodations, rate of pay, all of those things should be in the conversation about how our men's and women's national teams are handled by this federation. So looking at where we are, the U.S. Men's National Team Players Association have come out on yesterday and have reiterated their support as well for the female players, the U.S. Women's National Team players, and said this: for a year and a half, the U.S. Men's National Team players have made proposals to the Federation that would achieve equal pay for the U.S. men's and women's national team players, and they have said that we need to reach this level, this status. And this is a situation where we're going to have to see how this progresses. We know that the appeal is going to take place and is underway, but we don't know, how much longer this is going to drag out. Some say months, some say it could take over a year. And so we'll see how that continues. But the fact remains that the fight continues, and it should. Looking at other aspects of the American soccer landscape, it is clear that the current ecosystem that has been constructed by U.S. Soccer is not serving the game very well. And we know this because we're going to get into some specifics on this with Chris Kivlahan in just a few minutes, but the clubs in this country and the leagues in this country are operating with basically not just one hand tied behind their back, but they're operating with a lot of disadvantages. And those disadvantages come into the lack of diversified revenue streams, being smart in scheduling, being smart in how we structure our system. We're a massive continent-sized country, and the idea with the cities as large as we have in this country, that we have to have a national league that is having to get on an airplane and fly from coast to coast to play matches, when we have plenty of cities in this country that can support first division football from a metro market size, never mind the cities and communities that can be innovative and creative and create great products on the field, great quality and excellence on the field, and even smaller markets. This idea that we've got to have a team to be considered a top level team, to have to travel from Los Angeles to Miami to New York to Seattle to even leave the borders of the country and go to Canada is absurd. And that is another piece of this, that our system has been so poorly constructed from a travel perspective that creates unnecessary expenses, and it also deprives the fans. And that's a big piece of that the fans are not able to participate in a way that they would want to, the way that we see around the world when a team goes to play an away fixture. It's not realistic. It's not feasible that a big number of those fans are going to be able to get on flights and just fly and follow their team around the country. We've got to get smarter at how we do what we do. And I look forward to having Chris Kivlehan on the show here in just a few minutes. And we're going to talk through a bunch of issues in lower league soccer, including the scheduling, the pandemic, and some of the other things that he is hearing about what is going on in lower levels of the game. So that's coming up here in just a few minutes. Another thing, looking at where we are compared to overseas, as I mentioned, is revenue, but it's also affecting our restarts. Italy and Spain and Germany are all having conversations, as well as the UK, about how can we get restarted? When can we get restarted? What are our protocols? How can we make this manageable and feasible? And the reason why they're able to have those conversations right now is that they have a multiple factored revenue stream. It comes from multiple sources, multiple streams. And what that allows them is some flexibility. Now, does that mean that they want to play behind closed doors? Absolutely not. Do clubs want to lose that revenue? Absolutely not. But for the integrity of the competition and for planning and calendar purposes, do they have more flexibility than if you have all of your eggs in one basket? Absolutely. And that's the disadvantage that we are seeing here in America as it relates to American soccer. We just don't have that flexibility built in. And I look forward to getting up with Chris Kivlehan in just a few minutes to talk with him about some of these issues as well. But before we do, our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. Learn more about them at Ductic Brand, and place an order. When you do, use promo code DWSHOW. You'll get 10% off of that order at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back right after this. back into the show. Thanks for tuning in today. And we are happy and delighted to welcome a friend of the show, Chris Kivlihan, back to the show. Chris, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Lots changed since the last time we had you on the show. Last time we were talking a lot of, NISA, what could they do, what should they do, and looking at, the lower league landscape of American soccer. And we're going to get back into that again today, but from a very different perspective, as we're all dealing with the realities of this global pandemic. It has caused all kinds of issues, and just happy to have you on to kind of dig into some of these issues as you're seeing and hearing around the country, and also maybe you and I can do a little prognosticating on what could happen and what should happen going forward. In terms of the pandemic, it hit at a really weird spot in the American soccer calendar. I think it was like 2 weekends into the Major League Soccer schedule. It was after the first weekend of the USL Championship schedule. A bunch of other leagues were either just kicking off or about to kick off or prepping for their short season, summer schedule, like the NPSL and USL League Two schedules, kicking off typically in May. And, since March, things got put on hold, and then things got canceled, and we've just got chaos all over the American soccer landscape, and especially a bunch of chaos, and I would even classify some of it as devastation in the lower league levels as well. Curious what your thoughts are on where your head was at when this it was just locking down, that the country was just kind of going to lock down, and leagues were starting to at first it was we're going to put on pause for a few days, and then it turned into a few weeks, et cetera, et cetera. But in those first few days and weeks, what was kind of going through your mind? What were you looking at as, potential hiccups or adjustments that were going to have to be made as the whole country, and indeed the world, was, dealing with the pandemic in a very real way?
Yeah, I think it's something that I was keeping a close eye on, mainly from the perspective of, just as like a small business owner who has, employees that are my team members. I was watching it because, at a certain point you look at it and say, okay, this is really blowing up, as it gets into late February and early March. It's like, okay, well, we're gonna have to make adjustments to our business, right? And I've got to look out for these people, who are my team members, and make sure I'm making the right decisions, for everybody, and that I think is kind of analogous to what the business owners who own these sports teams, whether they're pro lower league teams or their adult amateur teams. It's a business that they're running, and you've got to try to make the right decisions for the people who work for you, and for your community, and that kind of comes first, right? And then how do you adjust the business and try to keep going accordingly. So it's harder for a professional sports team than a lot of other businesses, because they can't really operate, right? They can't have everybody work from home like I can for my business, right? I can just have my employees work from home. They can continue to do our jobs, right? It's not convenient. We don't have that team environment. But conversely, my employees are able to do their jobs, and they're safe in their homes, right? You just can't. You don't have that option as a team member or an owner of a of a sports team. So I think it's just very devastating on that industry in general, because a lot of these folks had made commitments financially with the expectation that there was going to be revenue to offset those, and hopefully either ideally they make some money, or break even, or at least have a manageable loss within a zone that they are comfortable with, right? And that really, this whole thing has really thrown all that math off. So there's the one hand, good news, people are doing the right things. They're putting everybody's health first, and that is important and necessary. But from the perspective of the businesses, that what will be after, I think it's probably going to really hurt operations that might have already been struggling a bit financially. I think that's true of businesses in general, but this is one industry that I think is hit very hard.
Yeah, I agree. When this started to kind of slow down and go into lockdown, what were you hearing from clubs and leagues in terms of, any kind of windows that they were looking at in terms of, hey, this is a doomsday scenario. We can afford this for X number of weeks or X number of months, but after that, like it could be catastrophic to our endeavor. Did you have any of those conversations? And if so, what were some of the comments or things that you were hearing in that kind of March, early April window when this was all still, I think at that point it was still very much a temporary mentality nationwide. We had not even really gone full out lockdown enough in the early stages, and so this was really starting to kind of be like, okay, is this going to be a 2 to 3 week thing? Is it going to look like 6 weeks? Is it going to look like 4 weeks? And now, obviously, that began in March. We're still in this cycle here in May, so it is obviously not let up. So what were you hearing in those early stages about what was feasible, what was manageable, and what might potentially be fatal or at least deal a very, very heavy blow in terms of either club operations or league operations the further the thing plays itself out?
Yeah, I think, some of the folks I had spoken to in the early phases of this, we're really looking for a decision to be made. So if you want to put it back like a month ago, where we're a couple weeks into it, I think the MPSL was the first league to pull the plug on its season. And that was actually something I was hearing from at least one MPSL owner, who, had some commitments that, he was going to be able to, not be able to manage financially if the league didn't make a decision quickly about what was happening for that season. So to the NPSL's credit, they were the first league to, at least national league that I'm aware of, to actually make a call to shut the season down. And if owners were able to get out of a commitment for the venue, right, for example, right, venue rental, if they could, or at least manage a termination fee that is not going to be as painful, right? I think making a fast decision by the NPSL relative to the other leagues, I think, was helpful, at least to some of the owners who I had heard from. And it makes sense to me, just as a business owner, that knowing that you're going to make that call pretty quickly, and then you can adjust to try to make sure you're going to be around 2021, even if 2020 is not going to happen. I think is pretty important.
Yeah, and whenever that timeline started to play out, and we heard the NPSL. They were very quick to pull a trigger, and at the time, I was one who was a little, I guess, skeptical of why would you pull the trigger so quick. We had looking at the calendar, thinking, okay, well, if this thing played into April and then started to ease up, you could still look at a reality of the NPSL playing, even if it didn't start till the 1st of June. Now knowing where we are and knowing now that the USL League 2 has been announced as canceled and so on and so forth, I think the NPSL, made a decision that I don't think they're going to be upset with later on. Whereas when they made it, I was like, man, there's a potential, we didn't know the timeline of opening the country up, but I was like, man, there's a potential if this thing opens up and everybody else plays and you guys just preemptively, a couple weeks in, I just thought there was a big risk to just saying we're done, give a 2-week window. We're going to reevaluate, let's say April 15th, and then make a decision, or put it off till May 1st, make a decision, whatever. But I was like, if this thing does open up in kind of a good scenario, right, and from a health perspective for the country, they could have egg on their face for pulling the trigger so quickly and having things play out in a good way. Obviously, seeing where we are now, it's been a much slower recovery and a slower reopening of the country. Many parts of the country still observing lockdowns, or at least reduced services, reduced privileges to get outside and conduct normal business. So I don't think they're going to have a situation now where they obviously were going to have could have had egg on their face. In the USL League 2 canceling, they're no longer kind of the standalone. NISA has now announced their spring portion of their season is canceled. So, we looking at where we are, I think seeing this cascade of events, and you mentioned a very key point here that I think we need to get to, which is how these teams are constructed, whether they're professional or amateur. Neither situation, professional or amateur, has a revenue source that is independent of match days. If you can't host match days with normal operations, meaning butts and seats, cars in the parking lot, etc., then you can't operate unless you're willing to just lose every opportunity for income. Like, if you're just willing to go, hey, I'm just going to write the check. I know it's going to cost me X amount of dollars and I'm not getting it back, but it is what it is. Because there's no TV money here. There's no real commercial sponsorship revenue coming in here. There's no solidarity payments, training compensation money coming into the system. Everything, even at Major League Soccer's level, is contingent upon, from a revenue standpoint, the primary source of revenue is match days. And we're seeing how American soccer is more vulnerable than the rest of the world when it comes to club operations at the professional level, all the way down to the lowest levels of the pyramid, because all of our eggs have been put in one basket by the brilliant, and this is completely laced with as much sarcasm as I can muster, brilliant architects of the U.S. soccer system. So, looking at the revenue side and the dependence on match days, how much do you think that if affects the ability for leagues like the USL, NISA, and in the future, the NPSL and USL League 2 to restart, knowing that match days are critical in terms of revenue for them to operate?
Yeah, I think my first concern would be, hey, let's make sure that any clubs are in a position to do the thing that's right for them. To be around for hopefully a full year in 2021, right? So I think leagues should consider not a one size fits all solution to to their season for whatever the remaining season may be. If it makes sense for, and like take USL for example, which is, they're not in the kind of spring fall split like NISA is. They're batting around some format ideas. There was a really interesting article by Jeff Reuter at The Athletic, in conversation with Nick Edwards from USL, with some scenarios they're mapping out, right? I think for the USL, for NISA, for any league that's going to try to play games later this year, maybe it makes sense to make it opt-in, right? If it makes more sense for a team, given their financial profile, to sit the year out and come back in 2021, why not preserve that organization, which then will, in the long run, preserve more jobs, right? And let them just take the rest of the year off, and then for the ones where it makes sense, to play, and they're there for the way that their expenses are structured or what their agenda is. Maybe they have a wealthy owner who doesn't really care about the money loss as much as others might, for a club that's really, not as well funded, right? Maybe they want to play and let the teams that want to play, right? And let the teams that want to take off, structure something. Maybe it's a cup format, maybe it's a short season format. Something for this year that's special, given the fact that we're in a special time, and hopefully U.S. soccer will not be an obstacle to that. I would hope that no one's that heartless when it comes to pro league standards and that type of thing, right? Because the aim should be how do we preserve things as much as we can for the future, versus trying to force something to happen this year that may, when we get to the fall, hopefully we're all in a better place and the public health crisis is under better control than it is right now, and we're all comfortable going to entertainment events and and all that publicly, but we might not be, right? So it's very possible that fall seasons will not happen, right? I know this sounds like sacrilege because you're in the Southeast, but college football is not a given this year, right? College football might not be able to happen, right? I'm sure they'll do everything they can to make sure it will, but at the end of the day, people's health has to come first, right?
Well, all I can tell you on the college football thing is that could be a start of a war. If they cancel college football in the South, everyone's going to wait on Nick Saban to rule, and whatever he says, they'll abide by. So, we'll have to wait that one out. I can't speak with any confidence as to what might happen on the college football scenario. I can just tell you that the country better buckle up. if they try to come in and say no college football, it's a different animal, and I don't know what would happen, but I would be nervous for those who might make the cancellation decisions. It would be an interesting thing to watch play out. On the football front, the real football, the soccer front that we talk about, looking at the Major League Soccer, USL Championship, NWSL, NISA levels of professional soccer in this country, because of that dependence on match day and match day revenue, even if there were some owners that were willing to eat a loss and willing to operate, even if it was, reduced revenue, I still think from everything I'm hearing, and I'm curious as to what you're hearing on this front, I still think that there is a real hesitancy to make any firm commitments to any schedule or dates until they know they can get butts in the seats in cars in the parking lot. That, the idea of playing behind closed doors, as we've heard, might be possibilities for restarts in Europe. It's just not a very likely reality in American soccer, because there's just no revenue in that formula and in that setup. Have you heard anything in regards to that, like the necessity for people in the stands and cars in the parking lot before a restart can happen, which in my mind makes soccer in America a much slower process that could return to the playing field than some other sports who could, possibly entertain the idea of, at least in an interim, doing, operations behind closed doors. What are your sources that you're talking to? What are you hearing from them in regards to that, having to have full clearance to have people in the stands in order to restart their leagues?
Yeah, so I would throw an idea at you there. So sometimes when we have situations that are crises or put constraints on us, right? Other doors open, right? Other opportunities emerge. So I was looking at Twitter, reading an article somewhere, and ESPN Plus is going to start airing the Korean baseball organization 6 nights a week. I saw that today on I forget exactly where. I'm sure it was off my Twitter feed somewhere. That's how starved people are for sports content right now. Right? I bet you people are going to watch it. Right? The NFL draft, I think, had some type of crazy viewership. Right? Just to even get that sort of not even real actual games, but like something to watch. Right? That tap back into their passion. Right? So if you take a league like NISA, right, that has a fall season and it has no broadcast contract, it's not a very big league. I think the intent right now is to play with 10 teams, right? Could they get some type of one-off broadcast deal that would help float that operation and make up for the ticket sales? I don't know. But, is there an opportunity to do something special for this year, right? I mean, maybe you have to, if you're USL, maybe you have to reposition it as a cup. Hey, we canceled the season, but we're going to do this cup, and the cup doesn't have a broadcast commitment, so we can sell the rights to it, right? There might be things like that, because I think, people on my Twitter feed are watching the Belarusian league, right? Just because they want to watch something.
Right.
So there's that opportunity. But, it also the situation has to be in hand enough that it's not a risk to the health of the players and the staff, right? Even if you're going to do closed doors, it's not worth it if it's going to cause devastation in the lives of the players and the staff. We can all be patient and wait, another 9 months to start in 2021. But assuming that type of thing's in hand, even if it's behind closed doors, maybe there can be some type of one-off TV deal, or some type of deal that creates funding, because there is a lot of pent-up demand.
Absolutely. And, I think looking at the social media posts and comments, people are not just longing for sports. I think we're all longing to get back to somewhat level of normalcy, and for a lot of people, sports is a big part of that. One of the things that I'm looking at in the American soccer conversation, that I don't think has gotten enough attention yet is the opportunity. You mentioned, out of these kind of situations, there can sometimes, necessity is the mother of all invention, is a phrase. And I look at where we are, and this may be a very unique time, but a really good time to, say, hey, look, we're going to just completely restructure and let's get on the FIFA calendar. Let's fully engage. Let's take it, advantage of the fact that everything's kind of hit the pause button here, and let's just regather and regroup so that our owners and everyone who are trying to figure out how do we make this thing fit, how do we make it work, how do we stay sustainable going forward, viable going forward. This idea of relaunching with a fall to spring calendar, which is what NISA kind of has in their fall and spring kind of separate seasons, which is really more of a remake of the old NASL calendar, but it's still somewhat oriented in that way already. I think the USL at the Championship League One level, as well as Major League Soccer, could definitely take a look at just using these months as basically like, instead of lost months, and trying to cram things in to get back into, a schedule of launching in February, March of 2021 for the 21 season. Instead, using this time to go, hey, let's restructure our leagues so that we can figure out ways to fully engage the global marketplace in January, as well as the primary market, which is in June, July, and August. There are people who, will say, if they're up north, there's just no way that you can do a fall to spring calendar. There's no way. Dude, they're already playing in the same months that they're playing right now. The only time that they haven't played is January, and I've been on record saying that the idea of a winter break like the Bundesliga in Germany is a perfectly thought out scenario that the Germans have instituted with their league, that we could easily adapt to our model. So that we could, honor those FIFA dates, honor the transfer windows, fully engage, kick off in early August, run into the beginning parts of December, take that winter break, come back in February, and especially your leagues that are national, you can schedule around winter weather in February, March. MLS is already kicking off, into February, early March anyway. So you're talking about a slight shift in schedule to get things properly aligned. To me, seems like a great opportunity to do it. I'm curious what you're hearing on that and what your thoughts are on finally getting all of professional soccer, not just NISA, but all of professional soccer, properly aligned with our calendar.
I mean, yeah, it's a good example of the type of opportunity that the situation, presents, right? If you said, okay, hey, we're just going to restructure when the season happens, I have not heard anything that would indicate that's happening. But I think, it is a great example of, looking at the situation and being resourceful and using an unfortunate opportunity to maybe, make improvements. So, I mean, hopefully the clubs and leagues are all thinking in that direction, because there's always, you can always try to find the silver linings, right, and ways to improve, even in these situations you're not fully in control of.
When we look at some of the things that hamper the development and progress in terms of quality, excellence, access, opportunity, in lower league soccer up into the highest levels of professional soccer here in America, we often look to the standards and the rules that kind of guide and shape that pathway or lack thereof for clubs in America, and that is the professional league standards that U.S. Soccer has put out. In those standards, there's a focus on how many can fit in your stadium, stadium capacities, time zone requirements, metro market size. And when you look at club viability, they have an extra clause in there about how your ownership has to be structured in the United States of America, which to me is absurd. It's actually one area where I think the NASL antitrust suit could get tossed out, that one provision. I don't see U.S. Soccer not having the ability to say, hey, our first divisions must have 15,000 seat stadium capacity, etc. But I think to narrowly define how ownership can take place in an organization, in a club, I think could be something that could be problematic in that lawsuit for U.S. Soccer. But what I really want to discuss for a second isn't just that clause, but a little bit broader discussion about what is not in our professional league standards. And that is a focus on multiple revenue streams that is worked into the calculations of club viability and league viability. All of the conversation is centered around, do you have someone worth X millions of dollars? Okay, well, we'll sign off on that. Never mind the fact that person's net worth when they qualify to own a club may have vanished and evaporated overnight when the market crashed. Maybe all of their money was in a certain stock and it's over when that stock goes bankrupt, and not just in the pandemic, but maybe some other time, just they put all their money in one place and now it's gone. It just seems to me such a really poor way to construct a set of standards to promote the growth of the sport in this country, especially now looking where we are in this pandemic. Everything from a revenue perspective being singularly focused on match day revenue, and not having these leagues required to, it's one thing to say you got to have a TV deal, which is in there, right? It says, hey, you got to have something. You got to at least show your games on YouTube. We'll allow that to satisfy that you're putting your games somewhere remote viewing capable. But it's another thing to say, look, you've got to show us as a league multiple streams of revenue for us to go, okay, this league is viable. Because we see around the world the solidarity payments, training compensation, the transfer market, the television revenues, the commercial and sponsorship revenues are all at levels so far and exceeding what we have here in the States. And to me, if you're the federation in charge of growing the game, which they say they are, according to their own mission statement and bylaws, shouldn't the federation be ensuring that our professional leagues, and I think even our amateur leagues, are working on ways to connect together and also create more pathways of revenue and revenue streams for the clubs and the leagues? I'm curious what your thoughts are on looking at where our professional league standards are in terms of club viability, in enforcing or making some type of concerted, focused effort on increasing the number of revenue streams, not just the overall revenue maybe that you're getting looking at a match day perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting, right? Because I think this was put to the test to a certain extent when Detroit City was looking to become a professional team. Because, they basically had built a business that worked, right? At least at the level that they were at, and worked very well. In that they were making money. They were putting, a much larger budget together than other NPSL teams. Great crowds, passionate crowds, moving a lot of merchandise, right? So they were having a lot of success, but in order to become a professional team to the pro league standards, you need to have that person $10 million net worth to join a Division III league, and they have to own 35% of the club. So in theory, these guys built this organization, up, and now they have to sell a piece of it to somebody in order to check this box, right? That I think was an example that sort of showed how fundamentally flawed, the approach is, because we're basically, the system is designed around not being successful, right? And so you had a club that had built a model that worked better, and they couldn't move to the next step the way that they were structured just because of the way the rules are, right? So, I think the answer is probably in between, where it's like, okay, you can have an investor of this net worth. I don't really think 10 million is enough, frankly. These teams lose, millions of dollars a year. So somebody's got a net worth $10 million is not going to be able to support a team, as much as that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. These teams lose a lot more money at an annual rate that someone who's worth 10 million net worth isn't going to be meeting the PLS standards for very long if they own a professional lower league soccer team in the United States. But allow another pathway, right? Which is maybe the more healthy pathway that you want to move towards over time, which is the Detroit City type of club. Hey, if you're able to show that you can actually have a working business model that functions, and you've got a track record, you don't need to bring in you need to sell 35% of your organization to a multimillionaire just for the sake of it.
Yeah, I agree. When I look at the PLS, as it specifically refers to the ownership net worth provisions, I just think it's such a poor metric to throw your eggs in that basket. Now, look, if you're Rocco Camiso and you're worth $10 billion and you want to stake your personal fortune as why your club is viable, I'm fine with that. Whatever, that's your prerogative. If you're Detroit City and you're similar to an Ibar in Spain, who is working their way up through the pyramid, they didn't have a multitude of investment dollars from the outside. They didn't have some wealthy owner that, like a Rocco Camiso, that was backing the club, but they were in the black. They operated on a policy of not having debt, and they had successfully, on a sporting merit provision, had successfully worked their way up to the top level of La Liga in Spain, and were met with critics from within the Spanish Football Federation saying, "Look, you've got to show that you have debt, that you can handle debt." And Ibar was going, we don't operate that way. We've shown that and so they were able to do some things. They had to do, raise some capital and do some things, and we're able to do it. And they've stayed in the league, and I think they've done really well since they've come into the league. But they're kind of an example in Europe, similar to a Detroit City that's wanted to work their way up and has shown and proven their club viability. And for me, as an American, looking at American soccer, I have a real problem with saying there's only one way a club can prove viability. Yes, you can do it by saying, I'm worth X amount of money, and I'm willing to stake my personal fortune to back the viability provision. Doesn't mean I know the business that I'm in. Doesn't mean I know how to at least reduce my losses, if not, reach the black or turn a profit. I may not have any competency at all in the soccer space, but I'm willing to stake my personal fortune on it because of whatever reason, right? Vanity, competitiveness, whatever. That's fine. And That's good and well and all, and if that's what you want to do, that's great. It's America. Again, you do what you want. One of the things that I am baffled by is not just a Detroit City who says, hey, we found a business model that works for us. We can show our viability, let us play. But I'm baffled by the specificity of the net worth ownership, to the point, if I put an ownership group together that had 10 people worth $10 million, collectively it's a $100 million net worth ownership group, and they would be unqualified to own anything above a third division, even though the collective ownership group would be worth $100 million, is another piece of insanity. So I'm looking at the way that these provisions, it's just not structured to A, do a good job at the business you're in, B, find alternate ways to prove your club viability, whether that's personal net worth or your operations, your track record, as you mentioned. And so looking at this and looking at our big landscape, zooming back out to the beginning of our conversation here, this pandemic has caused a lot of stress and pressure, financial pressure, and that is going beyond the club owners. That's hitting the coaching staffs, that's hitting the operations staffs, that's hitting the players, the support teams around this, and all because these entire organizations and these leagues have been built on one revenue model and one revenue stream, one ownership model, etc. And we've painted ourselves into such a small, narrow niche that any upsetting of the current climate and ecosystem could be catastrophic for quite a few clubs and leagues if this thing continues into the future for a very, very long time. So when I look at this and see where we are, I think that it puts a lot of the onus and pressure on the federation to say, look, we may not be able to provide a stimulus check to every club in America. We don't have the money. We can't do what every club would love, right? We can't write every club a $100,000 check or $1 million check or a $10 million check or whatever. We just don't have that kind of money. But here's what we can do. And we're going to work with our leagues, professional, amateur, whatever, to find creative solutions, as you mentioned before, whether that's the temporary cups and television deals, restructuring of calendars, whatever. But if we had some leadership, some innovative leadership from the federation on that front to say, hey, we realize we've painted ourselves and our entire ecosystem into a corner. Let's try to find some solutions to get out of this. I think we would be better off going forward. Obviously, I'm not very optimistic of that because of the track record. But I do think it's worth the consideration that the federation should be taking this time themselves to rethink how we do what we do in this country. So, Chris, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts on what you're hearing on the lower leagues and your observations of where we are, where we could be going, and the possibilities there. My last question for you is this. Looking at where we are and putting on, looking into the crystal ball and putting on your best prognosticator's hat, where do you think we are come September in terms of restart of play? Do you think it's likely we see NISA get going? Is it likely that the USL and MLS are playing? Or do you think this thing is going to be more catastrophic and everything just gets put off until 2021?
Obviously, I think we all hope that things return to normal sooner rather than later, just on a human level. If I were to speculate, just following the news like everybody else and looking at where we're at, I think if we get to a point where testing is improved over where we're at right now, where tests are plentiful enough that anyone can get a test, when they want to get a test, and that would include, teams being able to test players, at an appropriate rate, before and after matches. Maybe do the closed door model, right? I don't really think it's very likely that we're going to see, well-attended events happening for the rest of the year. I think closed door would be great for us to all see. And can there be other ways of monetizing that? Because you're going to have more demand, from people sitting at their homes who want to watch something. So I think that's probably where it lands. Obviously it could be better, it could be worse, right? I think that the most important thing is for everybody to make decisions with the future in mind versus the immediate gratification of this year. Let's try to make decisions around, what's going to be best for 2021. If that means, that we don't get to enjoy entertainment options that we would normally like to enjoy for the rest of 2020, but it's better for public health and we get through this faster because of that. Then I'm personally of the mentality, if I have to stay inside for a little bit longer to know that we're going to come out of this and not have it come back and hit us just as hard and just hit a whole reset button and have to do it over again, I would rather be patient right now, So that's kind of the way I look at it. And, hopefully we have some breakthroughs. Hopefully there's a breakthrough treatment, right? A cure of some type that, if you get this thing, you're not going to die. You're just going to get sick for a couple of days and take the medicine and you'll be better. Like if there was something like that, even short of a vaccine, that happened sooner rather than later, that would be a game changer, right? I don't think the drug that is being mentioned in the news right now is quite at that level. I think it just, it's some positive news. It shortens the time, but I don't think it's quite at that level from what I've read. If there's something that comes along that does a better job, maybe we can get back to business as usual quicker. But I think you got to take people's health first, preserve what you can for 2021, and then we can all get back to it hopefully next year. I
agree, and I hope that comes sooner rather than later. But as you said so well right there, where we're all in a good state of health as well in doing so, and being wise and smart about how we proceed. So, Chris, look, I appreciate you coming on the show. I hope these clubs and leagues take these opportunities to rethink and think outside the box, come up with some creative solutions. Regardless, whenever we do come back, there's going to be opportunities for innovators to innovate and do some cool things in the soccer space. And I would love to see that innovation take place here in the States and improve our game. So, Chris, appreciate your time for coming on the show. We appreciate it as always. And look forward to having you back on again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. That is Chris Kivillahan with Midfield Press. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Big thanks to Chris Kivelhan for coming on the show today. And thanks for watching. As always, you can watch at danielworkman.com/watch every weekday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.